Good morning. So we are now moving on to menu number 2, which is Italian. So for the menu we have a soup which is Minestrone Genovese. We have a main course which is ravioli bolognese, and we have a vegetable accompaniment to it which is melanzane parmigiana.
For the garnishes, we have mesclun, rocket leaves, ricotta, sun-dried tomato, fried basil and a tui. For the soup, we have zucchini, potatoes, celery, carrot, onion, oregano, cabbage, some pasta and beans. For the pesto, we have basil leaves, roasted pine nuts, garlic and parmesan cheese. For the tomato sauce, we have tomatoes, onion, garlic, basil and tomato puree. For the parmigiana, we have brinjal, 2 types of cheese, parsley and breadcrumbs. We are going to use the same tomato sauce for the meat mixture as well. So for the bolognese meat mixture, we have some mutton mince, some rosemary, onion, celery, carrot, and for the pasta stuffing, we have different types of cheeses, chili flakes, thyme and parsley.
So to begin with the plan of work, we have to keep the gas ranges occupied. So for that we have already kept some water on the gas in a copper bottom vessel, which is going to be used to blanch the tomatoes here, and then we are going to make a tomato sauce out of it, which is going to be used for the melanzane parmigiana as well as for the bolognese meat mixture. So once the tomatoes are blanched, then we are going to occupy one gas range with the tomato sauce, and on the other gas range we can start cooking the meat mixture. So right now at the table I am going to process the tomatoes which are going to be blanched, and we are going to process all the vegetables for the tomato sauce as well as the bolognese meat mixture. Okay, so we have removed the eye of the tomato and made a crisscross behind. We are waiting for the water to boil. Until then I am going to process the onion for the tomato sauce. So I am going to chop it up finely. Next we are going to chop the garlic very finely. Okay, so the onions and garlic have been processed. We all know how to blanch tomatoes, so for 20 seconds they will lie in the boiling water, and then we are going to shock it in cold water. So now that the tomatoes are blanched, we are going to concasse it. That means we are going to dice it up or chop it up very finely. Once you take out the skin, we will chop it up finely with the pulp. Okay, so now we are going to quickly process the vegetables for the bolognese. We are done with the carrots. We are now moving on to the celery, which also needs to be finely chopped. Okay, so the celery is finely chopped. We are moving on to the garlic. Garlic also needs to be finely minced. Okay, next we have some rosemary. So just taking out the leaves and finely chopping that as well. You can add it as a whole herb as well if you want to infuse the flavor. But we are going to finely chop the leaves and add that to the bolognese mixture. Rosemary is a strong herb, goes really well with red meat. Okay, so now that we are done with processing everything for the tomato sauce and for the bolognese meat mixture, we are now going to occupy both the gas ranges. Okay, so we are going to start with the tomato sauce on one gas. So in a saucepan, we've taken some olive oil. Okay, so in this, once the oil is hot, we are going to add in the garlic. Saute the garlic well. After that, in goes in the onion. Saute that as well. In goes in the tomatoes. We're going to mix the tomatoes with the onion and the garlic well. And then we are going to keep adding water in parts and keep this on a low flame for about 20 minutes. After which we will add in the tomato puree, basil and the seasonings. So while the tomato sauce is happening on the other gas, we're going to start with the bolognese meat mixture on the other. Heat up a wide based frying pan like this. You can also use a saute pan. Once the oil has become nice and hot, we're going to add in the garlic first. After that, we're going to add in the onion, celery, carrot, all at one time. So while this is sauteing here, we need to add water to the tomatoes. So we are going to use the same water that we used to blanch the tomatoes. So for right now, I'm adding 2 ladles of water and I'm letting this cook. Coming back to the pan here, once all the aromatic vegetables have been sauteed, I'm going to add in the mutton mince. We're going to add in the rosemary and we are going to let this mutton mixture cook for almost around 25-30 minutes until the mutton is cooked, because by that time the tomato sauce also will be cooked and we can take half of that tomato sauce and mix it in the bolognese sauce. So while the tomato sauce and the bolognese meat mixture is happening at the gas, at the table we are going to slice the aubergine for the melanzane parmigiana. So for that we have to thinly slice the brinjal and apply some salt to it so that the moisture releases from the brinjal, and then we are going to squeeze out all that excess moisture in about an hour's time, and then we are going to dust some flour and fry it until it gets nice and crispy. So we're going to apply some salt to the brinjal. Okay, so now we are going to make the pasta dough for the ravioli. So we are going to show you the authentic pasta dough with egg, and we are going to also show you the vegetarian version of the pasta dough. So for that we've taken about 100 grams of flour. For the vegetarian version you need to take about 2 tablespoons of semolina here, and we're going to add some water to it and let it soak for about 10 minutes before we actually add it on to the dough. So until that soaks in, we are going to finish making the pasta dough with the egg. Okay. So for that we are going to add in some salt first to the flour. In that we are going to make a well, and in the well we are going to add in, now these are 3 egg yolks. So first I'm just going to add 2 egg yolks and take a little bit of flour. First make a nice paste of the egg yolk and the flour, and then you knead the dough with the help of the egg yolk. No water is needed to make the dough. The entire dough needs to be made with the help of the egg yolk. So if we need more of the egg yolk to make the dough, we are going to add in more of the yolk, but no water is required to make the actual pasta dough. Okay, so for the vegetarian pasta dough, again we add some salt to the flour, and then we are going to add in the soaked fine semolina. And then we are going to form a nice stiff dough. So if we need more water, we'll take more water and we'll make a nice stiff dough. This is not the authentic pasta dough, but to have a vegetarian option, you can add semolina. If you have any kind of lecithin powder or any kind of a protein extract, that can be substituted for the egg, and you can make a vegetarian pasta dough as well. Okay, so if you look at the dough here, the vegetarian dough is nice and stiff. Okay, it's not going to be a smooth dough. It should not be a smooth dough. And if you look at the dough with the egg, okay, with no water, that's also a very stiff dough. And then this has to rest for about an hour inside the fridge. So 30 minutes have been done. So I'm going to add the tomato puree now to the tomato sauce. To that I'm just going to throw in the basil leaves. I'm going to add in seasoning, so some salt, some crushed black pepper powder, and a pinch of sugar just to balance the acidity of the tomatoes. This has to cook for another 10 minutes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use half of this tomato sauce for the bolognese meat mixture. So if you see here, I'm going to add around half of this to the meat, because the meat is almost cooked. So the meat and the tomato sauce both will get cooked in about 10 minutes. So while the tomato sauce is being cooked now for the last 10 minutes, as well as the bolognese meat mixture here, we are now going to work at the table and work with our next plan of work. Okay, so at the table now, what we're going to do next is we are going to make the stuffing for the pasta. So it's a very simple stuffing. So for that, first we are going to process some thyme, fresh thyme. You can use any dry herbs, but Italians use a lot of fresh herbs in their food. As we try to incorporate as many fresh herbs as we could, like rosemary, thyme, oregano, parsley, basil. Got 5 herbs in this menu itself. Okay, so we've got some freshly chopped thyme. Next we are going to use some fresh parsley. So we are making the most common, the Italians also love to make a cheese stuffing for their stuffed pastas. So it's usually just a plain cheese stuffing, or you can have ricotta and spinach, or you can have a ricotta and potato stuffing. So we've got some parsley here, finely chopped parsley. In that, before we add in all the cheese, we are going to add in some, so we're going to add in some chili flakes, and then we are going to add 4 types of cheese. So we have some cream cheese here, and then we have some cottage cheese or a fresh cheese. So I'm simply going to crumble it. Then we've got some mozzarella cheese, and then we have some processed cheese. Then we are going to add a pinch of pepper powder and a little bit of cream just to get it all together. So I'm adding a little bit right now. I'm mixing it. Now I don't want the mixture to be very flowy, otherwise it's not going to stay inside the ravioli as a stuffing. So I still want the mixture to be nice and firm, but I want it all together. So the cream is going to help in getting the mixture together. Okay, so if you look at this mixture, it's got all together, but it's still nice and firm. You will just taste this for salt if you need any extra salt, because the cheeses already have salt. So just check it for salt, and your stuffing for the pasta is done. Okay, so now we are going to make the pesto. So for the pesto, we have taken a bowl here. It's a very simple recipe. You have to just blend a couple of ingredients, starting with the main ingredient, which is your basil leaves. Then we have some toasted pine nuts here. To that we are going to add in some cloves of garlic. To that we are going to add in some Parmesan cheese. So I am going to add a little bit now, a little bit at the end, just to give it that texture. A little bit of salt. I can always adjust the salt later as well. A pinch of pepper powder. And of course, to blend it, we require a liquid medium. So we are going to add in some olive oil. The olive oil will help the pesto to blend. We'll mix this and blend it. Okay, so for the brinjal, we have to grate both the cheeses, which is your mozzarella cheese and the processed cheese. So we are going to grate that, because the tomato sauce is done. The brinjal is being soaked in that salt. Okay, so that is almost done. It's about 40-45 minutes, so it's ready to fry. So once this is done and the brinjal is fried, tomato sauce is done, we can assemble it and then it can go inside the oven. Okay, so we are going to finally chop the parsley once we grated the cheese, and then we can go on to frying the brinjal. Okay, so if you see here, the pesto has been blended, nice and green in color. You can't keep this out for very long, because the basil leaves will oxidize and they will start turning black when exposed to heat and light. So I'm going to add a little bit of Parmesan cheese just to give it that a little bit of a rough texture. And then if you want to store it, you have to store it in an opaque container like this, with a layer of an olive oil on top, and this goes inside the fridge. Okay, so for the brinjal, see, it has become nice and soft. So what we have to do is, we have to squeeze out as much as excess moisture as you can. Okay, and dust each and every brinjal slice, and then fry it at once in hot oil till nice and crispy. Okay, so now it's time to assemble the melanzane parmigiana. So for that, we've taken a roasting tray first. We've taken a ring mold like this. We've greased the inside of the ring mold with some oil. Then we have taken a silver foil here just to create a base. So you can see here, it's got a nice base. Just try making this straight away on the roasting tray so that you don't have to pick it up. Then we are just going to form layers. So we have some fried brinjal here. So I'm going to put 2 or 3 pieces. Make sure there is no gap, especially you want to push the aubergines to the sides to get the shape. Then I'm going to add a little bit of tomato sauce all around. Here I'm going to mix the mozzarella cheese and the processed cheese just to save a step. Then I'm going to add a little bit of this cheese. That's going to melt and that's going to really hold the entire melanzane together. A little bit of breadcrumbs, some parsley. In goes another layer of the brinjal. Now the second layer you can use all the broken pieces because they are not going to be seen. Okay, to that some tomato sauce again. So it's very much like a lasagna, but you're substituting the pasta with the brinjal. In goes in another layer of cheese, some breadcrumbs, some parsley leaves, and then finally another layer of the brinjal. The brinjal is the main component, so make sure to add enough of it. And then finally a little bit of tomato sauce on top. Some cheese. Here I am not going to add too much, but this is going to go inside the oven and turn nice and brown in color. And then finally, after it comes back from baking, I am going to put in the parsley. So that's the melanzane parmigiana. I am going to make one more, and then that goes inside a preheated oven 180 degrees Celsius for about 10 minutes or until the cheese turns nice and golden brown. Okay, so the melanzane has gone inside the oven. We are now going to start with the soup because the gas ranges are free. Our pasta sauce is done, pasta dough is resting in the fridge, the stuffing has been done. So all that we are left with is the soup. So that needs to go on the gas. So for that we need to process or cut the vegetables uniformly. So we are going to simply cut all the vegetables into small dices. So take a small piece of zucchini first, depending upon how many portions of soup you want to make, and then cut them into small dices. There is no standard cut or size, but because it is not a strained soup, you want the dices to be nice and uniform just for presentation. Okay, so for the soup, all the vegetables have been nicely processed. So it's a very simple soup. A little bit of olive oil, not too much. It's a thin soup. We don't want the olive oil to float on top. We simply have to saute all the vegetables, add the starch, add water or stock, add some salt, and it's done. So the oil is nice and hot. We're not adding any garlic because the garlic is there in the pesto. We are simply going to saute all the vegetables at once. We don't want to discolor them. It's just going to saute in oil just to brighten up. We also don't want it to be very soft. We want that crunch. So a quick saute of the vegetables on a slightly medium to high flame. To that we are going to add in raw pasta, we have macaroni, we have some partially cooked beans, you can use any beans, and we have some potatoes. So a quick stir. To this we are just going to add flavoring, a little bit of oregano. The main flavoring is going to come with the pesto and the natural flavor of the vegetables. To this I'm going to add little bit of salt, not too much. I can always adjust the salt later. And simply we are going to add some water. Give it a good stir on a low flame for about 10 to 15 minutes or until the pasta and the beans are cooked. So our soup is done. So the soup is done. The melanzane has gone inside the oven. Our stuffing for the pasta is done, the sauce is done, so now we just left with the rolling and the stuffing of the pasta. So we're going to start with the vegetarian dough first. What we have here is a very small domestic version of the pasta machine. Okay, so that has been attached to the table. We have the dough over here. We are going to slightly flatten it with a rolling pin first. And then pass it through the pasta machine. Pass it once again. roll the machine really fast, otherwise it's going to stick and tear. Moving on to the next level, which is at number 2. So then the gap gets narrower. Keep dusting the pasta dough with flour. Do not skip any level. So now we are at number 3. If you cannot work with a long sheet of pasta, you can just cut it into half. Okay, so for the pasta dough with egg, similarly, we're going to roll this as well. This is really a stiffer dough, so it will take some effort. Moving on to level 2. Okay, so both the pastas we have stopped at level 4 here. That really, the thickness, the level depends upon the pasta machine. So we are going to stuff the vegetarian pasta first. So we've got the sheet here. Different ways that you can stuff pastas. There are various types of pastas that you can stuff. There are various shapes. So we are going to show you the basic one, which is a ravioli, which can be either round or it can be square. So we have the ravioli cutters here. So we've cut 2 sheets of pasta here. At a distance, you pipe the stuffing. we are going to do is just lightly, you can use egg, okay, but that is if you're making pasta with egg. Here you can just simply use some water. So I'm just going to brush a little bit of water on the side of the stuffing lightly. The sheet is very thin, so it will end up breaking. This has to be done quickly, otherwise the pasta sheet either can get very soggy because of this water, or the other sheet can get too dry and start to tear. Then you keep the other pasta sheet on top. Then gently with both fingers tap this. Okay, to make things simpler, since we already have the cutter with us, you can cut small pieces, then gets very simple for you to fold the mixture. We have used water in this, hence these sheets are much more difficult. Okay, so we have the round cutter over here. Press this to remove all the air gaps. You want to store these, then you can put them on a bed of semolina and you can freeze them. So we've taken a plate, dusted it with some flour. We're going to put these veg stuffed raviolis. We're going to keep them in the freezer as of now, or you can even keep it outside if you're going to cook them in another 15-20 minutes, but just keep them covered, or they can straight away get cling wrapped and they can go inside the freezer. Okay, so for this pasta roll with egg, we will now cut them into squares. Slightly brush these pasta sheets with some water. You can also use some egg. So either way, you can put the mixture and then brush, or brush and then put the mixture. Okay, so we are putting the sheet of pasta and then seal the pasta around the mixture. Okay, so either you can use this, but since we've already used a cutter for the veg pasta, the round one, we're going to show you how you can use this roller as well. So it is simple. We don't really waste this. This is called pappardelle pasta. So these are your raviolis as well. Okay, so for cooking the pasta, we take salted boiling water and just add the ravioli inside. Once the raviolis, the pasta gets cooked, it will start floating on top. I'm going to take it out and serve it at once, either tossed in a sauce or separately. So if you see here, the water is not boiling, but the pasta is floating on top here. So that means the pasta is done, and you can just carefully take it out. So for presentation, we're going to put some of the bolognese sauce on the base. Again some sauce. And some sauce on top. So like I told you in theory class, if the stuffing is smooth, you need to have a rustic, rough sauce. Moving on, we are just going to put in some rocket leaves on top. A little bit of olive oil, basil oil. Then we are just going to crumble some ricotta. Pine nuts, and then just a few pieces of sun-dried tomato. These also were made in college, where we just dried the tomato in the oven, 0% humidity, 100 degrees Celsius for about 4 hours, and then soaked them in some oil. And that's ravioli bolognese. Okay, so for the melanzane, see over here you can see the melanzane is done. So now to take it out, you have to just scrape off the side because the cheese has got melted and it has got stuck onto the sides. Just scrape off the sides here. Carefully take out the wrapper. Push this down carefully. Put some muslin or a mix of microgreens on top, and then a piece of tui. So either you can put on top like this or you can just put on the side. Okay, so for the soup, we're just going to pour the hot soup into a soup cup. And then just before service, around a teaspoon of pesto. Mix it. This is the traditional authentic minestrone from the northern part of Italy, from Genoa.
Throw some cheese on top, and this goes in front of the guest at once.
So we are making the vegetarian version of the main course. So we had made ravioli bolognese, which had meat. So over here we have the vegetarian pasta that we had made with the same stuffing that we had made for the meat version. Now for replicating the meat sauce, what we have here are mushrooms. Okay, so we've got mushrooms in place of the meat mince. You can use a couple of variety of mushrooms. Right now we are using only plain button mushrooms, which have been finely cut over here, and we have all the flavoring which are very similar to the ones that go in your bolognese mixture. So we have onion, garlic, celery, carrot, tomatoes, herbs. So these are very similar that go in your bolognese mixture. We are going to add some white wine, and we are going to add some fresh cream. Okay, so this classic sauce is called as fricassee, mushroom fricassee, okay, which is slightly influenced by the Italian and the French cuisine. So we are going to make a mushroom fricassee with the vegetarian pasta. We are going to start with some butter. Okay, around 30 grams of butter. Going to add in a little bit of oil, not much, olive oil. Okay, so the butter has melted. We are going to add in the garlic first. The garlic has to turn nice and golden. In that we are going to add in the celery and the onion. Okay, we now are going to add in the carrots. Saute this well too. Now we are going to add in the finely chopped mushrooms. Since they are finely processed here, they are not going to take time to cook. What we are looking for is for the mushrooms to saute, cook, leave moisture. That moisture will dry out and the mushrooms will start browning further, and that's what we are looking for. At this point of time, I am going to add herbs, which is oregano and thyme. I'm going to add in parsley at the end. To help the mushrooms ooze out moisture faster, we're going to add in some seasoning, which is salt. With that, we'll add in some pepper. So if you see here, the mushrooms have turned darker in color. The water has completely dried out. Keeping the flame medium to high, I'm going to add a little bit of white wine. Not too much, because we're also going to add in some tomatoes, so it will get too sour. But an authentic fricassee does contain white wine. Let this cook for about 2 to 3 minutes until the tomatoes are cooked. Okay, so if you see here, the entire mixture is completely cooked and it is dry. To this, we are going to add in the finely chopped parsley. Okay, and we are going to finish this with some fresh cream. Now the amount of cream really depends upon the consistency of the sauce that you need. So I'm going to add a little bit of cream first. If you have any mushroom liquor, if you're using dry mushrooms and soaking them, and if you have some mushroom liquor, you can add that as well. But we really want to replicate the bolognese, hence I'm not really going to make it very thin. Okay, but I can do with a little bit of water. So half a ladle of water. fricassee is done. So the water is boiling here. So we had frozen these. Just simply add them in boiling salted water. And the same rule follows here. The pasta should start floating on top. That's when you know that the pasta is cooked. So let them become nice and hot. So if you see here, once you switch off the gas or if you stop the boiling, the pasta has to float on top. That's when you know the pasta is done. So you take it out carefully with the help of frying spoon. Vegetarian pastas are much more difficult to work with. They end up tearing because there is no protein, right, of the egg. So the binding becomes slightly more difficult. Okay, so for presentation, exactly similar to the one we did for the meat. There we had put the bolognese mixture on the base. Here we are putting the mushroom fricassee at the base. And slowly place the pasta. Again sauce on top. Then finally a little bit of lettuce with some basil oil, a little bit of chili oil, a little bit of microgreens, pine nuts here and there, and then a few pieces of sun-dried tomatoes. And then finally a little sprinkle of Parmesan cheese.